stone, you ain't coming home.
Alright, so for this guide, we're going to be covering kind of a beginner's guide for players who are new to Deep Rock Galactic. And there's a lot of confusing things that you have to worry about when you first start playing the game. You know, you have, which character do I play? Don't worry about that right off the bat. You're going to have to play all of them. You know, comes down to what weapon modifications do I run? Don't worry about it. You're going to have to unlock them all. You know, what do I prioritize first? Do I prioritize my armor? Do I prioritize my secondary tools? Do I prioritize my weapons? Don't worry. But the thing I don't think enough people really talk about are the grenades. So if you did not know, every class has 3 grenades to choose from. I would like to see this expanded to maybe 4 grenades in a future update. I know that they are planning on bringing out a set of 3rd weapons for each of the secondary weapons. A third set of secondary weapons for each class is the next update. But I would not mind seeing a potential 4th grenade. Now, every class has good and bad grenades that we're going to talk about. We're going to explain what all 12 of the grenades do. We're going to explain which one you should run, which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones are kind of interchangeable. So to start with, we're going to start with the sticky grenade. This is the gunner's first grenade. Now, we're going to go in order because most people play gunner first. You're going to play gunner in the tutorial, you know. So it's good to get comfortable with this. You can carry 6 of these grenades. They have a guaranteed fear factor on them. This is your standard grenade. So here that works. You throw the grenade, it sticks to a target, that target immediately becomes feared, which means it runs back to its allies, and then it blows up. So the design is that you throw the grenade, it sticks, they run to their buddies, grenade gets more of them. It's a standard grenade. It's pretty good. It's not very, it has no real utility outside of me go boom. Not me go big boom, not me go little boom, just me go boom. This is your standard grenade. Now the next one that you will unlock is the Incendiary Grenade. Now, you can only carry 4 of these. So 2 less than the Sticky Grenade, which is a liability. However, here's the benefits. When you throw the Incendiary Grenade, it covers a large area in fire. But how it spreads is random. There's not a preset fire spread. So it does do fire damage, which is pretty good. And it is an effective tool if you need to, like, burn an area. Good in Fungus Bogs and good in Glacial Strata. Those are 2 maps that it really excels at. I think everything else, though, is held against it. So for one thing, if you're throwing a grenade against farther away enemies, if you throw this on farther away enemies, as long as it hits somebody, damage is going to be dealt. On this one, it might where enemies move at you faster. The grenade will actually spread behind the enemies as they're moving towards you. So you might hit the front group of enemies, but the back group of enemies have already moved up out of range. You can damage yourself a lot easier on these. This, you stick it to an enemy, you want to try and aim it far away. If it lands relatively close to you, yeah, you're going to take a decent amount of damage, but, I mean, you take a chunk of damage and that's it, you know? This has burn over time. This damage is a lot easier. There's also less of these. If you want to throw your sticky grenades out willy-nilly, you can afford to do that. These don't really have control. They take a lot of control away from you. They don't do as much damage. It's great for crowd control. It's great for just, like, eliminating a swarm. You know, you throw it into a swarm, it's going to do a lot of damage to the swarm. Whereas this, you know, might not do enough damage to the swarm, but this is a little bit more unpredictable. It also does a lot more damage to your allies because of how it spreads. How the fire spreads, it could spread in ways and hit teammates that you didn't necessarily intend to spread because it's not predictable. They might be trying to, like, go a certain way and the fire ends up spreading towards them. The fact that you also carry 4 of them means it kind of limits your ability to use them as much as you would like. Now, basically a combination of these two would be the cluster grenade. So the cluster grenade is the last grenade you unlock, and this is the one that I do recommend. So the cluster grenade, you only carry 4 of them, like the incendiary grenade. So if you're looking for the most explosives on hand, you're going to run the sticky grenade, because you get 2 extra grenades. But, in my opinion, I prefer this. So the way it works is simple. You throw a grenade, it explodes into mini grenades. So it has a much larger area of effect in total. Even though it only covers an effect radius of 3.8, whereas the incendiary grenade covers a radius of 4.3. So, you know, this is 0.5 bigger than these are. But there's more of these. 50% stun chance and duration. That doesn't really matter. The main benefit is that because this covers a wider area and has much more consistent damage. It actually has more damage than the sticky grenade if all the bomblets hit something. This is the main reason why most people are going to run the cluster grenade. Cluster grenade is the way to go. You're only going to carry 4 of them, so you're only going to be using them when you know you need a grenade. They're very good for dreadnought fights, because you throw one, it's going to hit everything. It's going to hit every part. It's going to hit every part of the oppressor. It's going to hit every part of a dreadnought. It's going to hit every part of a praetorian. It doesn't get. It negates armor, pretty much. Good grenade to have. The only downside to this grenade, in my opinion, is the fact that you carry 4 of them. But if you carried more, it'd be kind of broken. This grenade is kind of a backup option. Like, for example, if you end up throwing grenades into your teammates a lot, you might want to stick with the sticky grenade instead, as opposed to the cluster grenade, because this will do less damage to your team. But overall, that's the gunner's grenades. Now for the scout does not have a straight up damaging grenade. Alright, so the first grenade you're going to have is the IFG. This is a slow grenade. Think of it this way. You carry 6 of them. You throw it, and it slows enemies by 25%. It weakens their damage by 30%. It lasts a decent amount of time. And it applies an electric field. Now, it doesn't do damage, but a lot of scout weapons have, like the Zhukovs, they have, you know, bonus damage against targets in an electric field. So this activates your electric field. This gives you an electric field to activate these effects. Same thing for the Loki Smart Rifle on the Engineer. Has bonus damage against electric field. So it doesn't actually deal damage, but it does give you the ability to do more damage if you're running certain mods. Now, it's slowing down enemies. You're primarily going to use your grenades in one of 2 situations. Against bigger enemies like Praetorians, Oppressors, Dreadnoughts, or you're going to use them for large swarms. This is a good thing to use against swarms for slowing down a large group of faster, smaller enemies. This is not very good against larger enemies, because they're going to be slower, like Oppressors. This isn't very helpful for Oppressors. You want to do damage, not slow them. This is a good starting grenade, but the next grenade you get is a definite upgrade, the Cryo Grenade. Now this does only carry 4, so you get less of these. So what does it do? Basically, it will immediately blast out cold. Now, it has an effect radius of 6, but look at it this way. Look at it as an effect radius of 3 and an outer radius of an extra 3. So if you get a direct hit on a Cryo Grenade, what it's going to do is it's going to outright freeze enemies. And when an enemy is frozen, they take 50% more damage from all sources and 50% more damage from melee in particular. Essentially, what this allows you to do is throw a Cryo Grenade on, say, a Praetorian, power attack with a pickaxe them one more time, they're dead. Or shoot him a couple of times, they're dead. So this grenade massively increases your lethality. It also freezes and slows enemies. So if you're in a very heated race and you're trying to get back to the drop pod and you're trying to outrun the timer, you got hordes of enemies that are slowing you down, you throw a Cryo Grenade. It's going to freeze them outright for 4 seconds. 3 seconds. And then they'll have to catch up to you. So 3 seconds where they can't move versus the IFG where it's 15 seconds and they move slower, but they're still coming after you. And then once they leave the radius of the effect, then they're back to normal speed. Now, enemies that aren't frozen are chilled. They still take the bonus damage, bonus 30% damage, and the 50% from melee. But they're slowed as well. They have their movement speed slowed. This is the closest thing that you're going to have to a damage grenade as a scout. And I do recommend this grenade. I think this is the best grenade option you have. Now, last grenade you have also only has 4 grenades to it. It's not nearly as impactful. This is the Pheromone Canister. The way this works is you throw it on an enemy, and all of the nearby enemies begin attacking them. So it's good to throw into a swarm if you want the enemy to, like, turn on themselves. But it doesn't help you kill them any faster other than them just attacking each other. For example, on the Cryo Grenade, it freezes them, which negates their armor, except for oppressors and dreadnoughts. On the Pheromone Canister, they're still attacking each other through their armor, so they're dealing less damage to each other. In addition to this, another issue I have with this weapon, if you are in the vicinity of the Pheromone Canister, they're not going to stop attacking you. They're just going to prioritize enemies that are closer to the canister dispersal than you, if they're closer to that enemy than they are to you. In addition to this, it's not effective for airborne enemies. For example, if you throw this on a Mactera and hit the Mactera in the air, ground-based enemies are unaffected because they can't hit it. They can try, but they can't hit it. If you throw this on a ground-based enemy and a swarm of Mactera comes in, they're not affected by the canister because it's on the ground. They're going to ignore that. So, against Mactera, this really struggles. And against Nemesis, against static enemies like Spitball Insectors, Korlak Tyrants, things of that nature, Betsy's, Prospectors, it's not going to work on them. It really only works on, like, ground-based Glyphid Grunt Swarms. So I do think that the Cryo Grenade is your best choice. And again, the IFG is a serviceable option. You should get comfortable using this. And with the right build, if you have, like, an electric-focused team, you know, this is a pretty good gun. Or a pretty good grenade. But the Cryo Grenade is better. Which is funny, because I don't like the Cryo Cannon on Driller. Speaking of Driller, let's talk about Driller. So the first thing that I want to mention is that Driller's impact axes are the most common choice. It's your starting thing. And yes, it is technically a grenade. Alright? Now, here's the thing I want to mention with the Driller. So, the Driller has access to his pickaxe, power drills, and impact axes. This gives him 3 melee-based damage abilities to trigger the passive perk Vampire Whiff. So most people typically run impact axes. They are the best choice, and we'll cover why. But I'm going to go in reverse order. So let's start with the other options. The last grenade you unlock is the Neurotoxin Grenade, which you can only carry 4 of, which is the lowest amount of grenades that the Driller has access to. What it does is it releases a cloud of toxic gas, covers a wide area. It poisons, it does damage over time. And it can be set on fire. Now, there's good and bad to this. Number 1, the poison over time effect, while nice, doesn't slow enemies. Now, it doesn't damage allies, which is nice, but it doesn't slow enemies at all. Whereas the Corrosive Sludge Pump, which is a primary weapon for the gunner, here, has a damage over time effect and slows enemies. Alright? So the Neurotoxin Grenade is a weaker version of that. In addition, it can also be set on fire. Now, when the cloud gets set on fire, that deals a lot of damage to enemies that are in it. But it can also damage your teammates. Also, the Driller does have a very easy way to set things on fire. He has the flamethrower. But most people don't run the flamethrower. Most people run the cryo cannon. So specifically for the Driller, Neurotoxin Grenades pretty much only work in a flamethrower build, or with a flaming gunner build. Or if a gunner has an incendiary grenade. But then again, if a gunner's running an incendiary grenade and you're running neurotoxins, you're each essentially having to give up one of your grenades at the same time to get this combo to work. Very good against certain types of bigger enemies that you're afraid of. Not as good against larger groups of smaller enemies. Because it's kind of overkill. The Neurotoxin Grenade or the Incendiary Grenade by themselves is usually better. And the fact that you only carry 4 of them means he's going to rely on resupplies more. Now next up you have the HE Grenade. Now this grenade is essentially the sticky grenade, but instead of having the stick, you're trading the stick factor for armor break and a little bit more damage. It has a slightly bigger blast radius than the sticky grenade. You carry the same amount at 6. It does slightly more damage than the other one, and it has massive armor break. It has 400% armor break versus 100% on the sticky grenade. And it still has that fear factor as well. So they'll run away from the explosion. Here's the thing. This grenade, while a nice grenade, is lackluster compared to the axes. Because you carry more axes. The axes are much more controllable. They're much more forgiving. This can damage your teammates as well. While the armor break is also nice, a normal grenade is going to do the same, is going to do a decent armor break against things like a Praetorian. And it's going to fear it, run away. Versus this, it's going to just obliterate its armor, but it's also going to do a lot more damage, so, I mean, at that point, you don't really need follow-up on it. It just makes the follow-up easier, I should say. Throwing axes are the primary thing that are run. Here's the way it works. You press and hold your grenade button. It brings up a throwing arc. When you release it, it throws the axe. Now, you can carry 8 of these. This is the most of any singular grenade type that you can carry. You can carry 8 of these bad boys. And if you miss an enemy, you can walk over to the environment and pick up your axe and retrieve it. So if you have bad aim, you can keep using them until you get better at them. They do a lot of damage too. They actually do more damage than the HE grenade, but to a single target as opposed to a group. So you say, well, this is a crowd control option, right? But the driller has 3 separate crowd control weapons at their disposal. So they don't really need their grenade for crowd control. And this ignores armor. And it's a melee, so it triggers melee-based abilities, and enemies who are weak to melee, this does more damage to. And it has a guaranteed stun chance. That's the thing that's not mentioned in the stats down here. It's not mentioned. Guaranteed stun chance. So, for me, what I like to do is use this to hit a Praetorian at range. It's going to take half their health bar off. It's going to stun them. And I can switch to my stubby and light them up. A pickaxe, power attack, and an impact axe can kill almost anything. I've killed an oppressor in a power pickaxe attack and 2 throwing axes. This is definitely the most valuable because it does take some practice aiming. It's not a fire and forget type thing. It's something you can use. But it gives you a very good degree of control. It also has a small area of effect too, where you can damage other enemies. So if you hit somebody in the center of a Glyphid swarm, you can actually do a decent damage to the group as well. They're not outright killing everything like the HE grenade, but you do get more damage. You do get to retrieve them. The trick a lot of people say is if you have 4 impact axes, when you go to pick a supply drop, you can throw them in the ground next to the supply drop, pick up your supply drop, and then come back and pick up those 4 axes that you threw on the ground for later. Neat trick, but only if you're planning on camping that area out. I don't know if you're planning on keeping your impact axes. I tend to keep my grenades for, like, intense situations. Either of these grenades, in my opinion, are good. I think the HE grenade gets left behind a little bit too much. I do like it. But another thing a lot of people forget is you carry Satchel Charges. Like, This is my build for the Satchel Charges. Now, yes, I could carry, you know, an extra 2, potentially. So I do 375. And I can carry 4 of them. Or I can carry 2 of them and do 875. And I can pick them up. But yeah. You have Satchel Charges at your disposal. So you can use these instead of using the HE Grenade. Definitely throwing axes are the best choice. It's pretty much... Now the last one is the Engineer. And the Engineer really only has one good option. So your starting one is the Lure. Alright? Well, the way this works is it has a dancing dwarf that can distract up to 10 enemies. It lasts 20 seconds. You carry 4 of them, which sucks automatically. And it unleashes an electrical charge at the end of the duration that damages enemies. And you, if you're close enough. But it can hold 10 enemies at a time. It's basically, you throw it away from you, enemies swarm it, and you kill them while they're over there. Or you run past them if you have to. This is similar, basically like a scout type grenade. Every class has like a generic type of grenade. This is your scout grenade for the Engineer. I personally don't like this grenade. First off, you can damage yourself at the end of the 20 seconds. Second off, in that 20-second duration, I can kill most of those enemies. It's really good for getting a large cluster of enemies to group up for a grenade launcher or a breach cutter round. But it's not necessary. And the fact that you only carry 4 of them, I'm not a fan. Next up is your Plasma Burster. This is the one I recommend. These are basically bouncing betties. So this bounces 4 times. It releases a scorch of plasma. Does about 60 damage. Relatively wide area. So about 240 damage in total. Which is a little bit less than 2 sticky grenades. But it bounces. So you can actually throw this as into a group as you're running away from the group. And it will just keep demolishing that group. Good area of effect. It's a little bit of damage. It also has a guaranteed fear chance, which is not mentioned here. So this is kind of like your gunner grenade, so to speak. And it is your best damage grenade, in my opinion. I think it's the one you should run. You carry 6 of them, so you can afford to use these a bit more often. And because they deal plasma damage, they deal a type of fire damage, it does ignore armor to a certain extent. So it is a lot more valuable than it appears. The last one is the Proximity Mine. Now again, you can only carry 4 of these. Basically, they're like a satchel charge of a driller, but they deal less damage. The way it works is you stick them to a surface. It takes 3 seconds for them to arm, which is a problem to use them in combat. You have to plan these out ahead of time. Like for certain types of missions where you can plan ahead. For example, I would say a Dreadnought mission, you can kind of lay them out around the egg. So once you've shot the egg and it comes out, they have to move into the proximity mine. Although to me, that doesn't really work against Hive Guards or the Twins, but never mind. The way it works is quite simple. See, I like the Plasma Burster better, I'm sorry. You stick them. After 3 seconds, if an enemy walks over it, boom! Deals 110 damage. That's less than sticky grenades. That's less than 2 hits from the Plasma Burster. And it doesn't really do anything else besides it goes boom. Now the thing is that you can pick them up afterwards. So it's basically the Satchel Charge equivalent for the Engineer. But in my opinion, what you should be running, you should run your Plasma Burster, Cluster Grenade, Cryo Grenade, and Throwing Axes. That's what you should be running for each class. Now, if you wanted to have a secondary option, for example, depending on your build, for the Gunner, I would recommend the Sticky Grenade. I think their Incendiary Grenade is pretty bad. For the Scout, I recommend the IFG. The Pheromone Grenade is alright, but it's still the weakest of the 3. The HE Grenade is the second one I would recommend. The Neurotoxin Grenade can be helpful, but it depends a lot more on the weapons and the teammates you're playing with than it does actual general build. And these are kind of like mini satchels. And for the engineer, I would honestly take the lure as a second choice, but I really wouldn't take either of these second choices. They're just too inferior to the plasma burster. So anyways, that has been my thoughts on the grenade options available to you for the mines of, or the dwarves in the mines on Deep Rock Galactic. I hope this has been educational, and I will see you guys in the next